So thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Miriam Green. I'm the Director of Marketing and Alumni Affairs at American Friends of the Hebrew University. The HU Alumni Association seeks to engage all HU alumni in the U.S. to foster a lifelong connection to the university and to connect fellow alumni around the country and around the world when we can. And even before we were all socially distancing, we have been and will continue to have events like this and more to continue to bring our alumni community together. If you're interested in learning how you can get more involved with us for alumni, please email alumni@afhu.org. And just a few ways you can get involved with us is continuing to attend future events, letting us know about your alumni story and photos. We always love seeing those and sharing them, letting us know you have a job opening to put on our alumni job board, and giving to the Alumni Annual Fund, which supports student scholarships at the Hebrew University, something that is always needed. Again, to learn more, please email alumni@afhu.org. On February 28th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, you are welcome to join HU on campus from the comfort of your couch. The 2021 Olive Conference will transport attendees to the university for a day of learning, insight, and education. A Portal to Tomorrow, bringing the Hebrew University of Jerusalem to you, will bring together researchers and academics from the university to discuss their work in fields ranging from health, agriculture, and nanotechnology to the humanities, environment, and life sciences. The conference will showcase Israeli innovations that are shaping our global tomorrow. And our next Torch Talks will be on March 15th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for a fascinating conversation discussing music's effects on our brain and emotions. Registration links will be put in the chat shortly. To learn more and to register for these events, please visit afhu.org/events. Again, for today, everyone will be on mute during the presentation, but there will be opportunities for conversation and we will be taking questions periodically throughout. To submit a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll do our best to get to as many discussion points as possible. I'm now pleased to introduce Hebrew University Professor Elyakim Kislev. Elyakim Kislev is an assistant professor in the Fetterman School of Public Policy and Government at the Hebrew University and a research fellow at the Truman Institute, specializing in minorities, policy and technology, and single studies. He holds a PhD in sociology from Columbia University, and if one wasn't enough, he has 3 master's degrees in counseling, public policy, and sociology. He received the U.S. Department of State Fulbright Fellowship and the Award for Outstanding Fulbright Scholars. He is the author of Happy Singlehood, The Rising Acceptance and Celebration of Solo Living, published by the University of California Press. The book has been translated into many languages, including Chinese, Arabic, Japanese, and more. Happy Singlehood has been featured around the world in the Washington Post, The Guardian, Huffington Post, Cosmopolitan, Vice, Globe and Mail, Elle, New York Daily News, and has been on CNN, BBC World News, BBC One, BBC Radio, Bloomberg, and covered again by media outlets around the world. He is a regular contributor to Psychology Today, and his articles have garnered over 500,000 reads and are cited frequently. He's working now on his next book, Relationships 5.0, asking how recent technological developments may cause us to think differently about our family lives, love affairs, and emotional needs. It analyzes 3 technological revolutions in the making: the cognitive, AI, sensual, VR and AR, and physical, robot revolutions. Dr. Kislev, take it away. Oh, and actually, sorry, right before you start, we will be having breakouts during today's presentation. So we'll let you know when that's going to happen, and we'll automatically place you into them so you don't have to worry about doing anything.
Thank you, Miriam, and thanks everyone for attending this Zoom event. I will be very happy to meet you and to talk with you today about the stigma against singles. So this is basically maybe one part of my book. maybe the most important one in the sense of how we will go about singles in the future, what social change is required, and so on. So let's dive right into the what we are going to do. So at the beginning today, I will want to tell you a bit about the reality. What's going on in terms of singleness, in terms of singlehood, and so on around the world. Then we will think together, what can we do about it? If we can change the reality, or should we change how we feel about it? We will focus about singles stigma. Then we will open the ground for discussion. We will continue about a new term that maybe some of you are not familiar with, singleism. Discrimination against singles. We will discuss the consequences of singleism, and maybe we will have enough time to get into some of my findings about the strategies and the toolbox that singles adopt to defy social pressure, social exclusion, and discrimination against singles. Then we'll have open a Q&A. I will be happy to hear your questions and just to talk freely with you about situations of today's singles. So let's dive straight into this reality, today's reality. So in the US, the percentage of single adults has gone from 22% in the 50s to over 50% of the adult American population today. This is statistics from 2017, but it doesn't change. We currently have around 51% of the American population, of the adult American population, who are single. And it's a great opportunity for me to define singles. So singles are those who are never married, divorced, or widowed. And in my book, I defined singles not just 18 years and older, but 30 years and older. And I did it only because I thought between 20s, between the 20 years old and 30 years old, my suspicion is this, that in most cases, the social pressure is not so high. And I want to talk about the condition of singles that are under pressure in a way. So I chose the age of 30 because this is also around the mean age, the average age of marriage around the world. So it makes sense to talk about those who are over the average age and how they fare in being single. So in many European major cities like Frankfurt, Munich, Paris, Stockholm, over 50% of households are single and occupied with one person. Even in China, the Chinese household size fell from 5.4 in the 40s to 3.1 in 2000s. This is the 2005 is the last available census in China. This was what I saw. So in 50 years, we see a real change, and we all know because of Alibaba and AliExpress, we all know about the singles days, which is quite successful, even more successful than the American one. I don't know how many of you know even about the Singles Awareness Day in the US. It started a few years ago, and actually it moved around. So at the beginning, they thought about doing it in January because one is a good number. It's not 11/11, it's in January. But now I believe the Americans celebrate Singles Week in September. I think it's in the second week of September, but it's still not known, and maybe it's also because of the stigma around it and so on. We will think about it. And let's continue. I don't know if you know about this phenomenon of parasite singles. So in Japan, it's very popular. Young people decide to stay with their parents. In English-speaking countries, it's called basement dwellers. People that, young people that basically stay with their parents long-term. They don't want to get out of their parents' apartment, and they certainly are not married. Most of them are not married. So in Japan, the term is even more negative, and it's called parasite singles. In Italy, for example, it's called bambucini, which is grown-up babies. And we see that phenomenon across the world. So in the US, 33% of young people between the age of 25 to 30 are basement dwellers. In the UK, it's around a quarter. In Japan, it's 42%. And even more, Japan, for me, it's kind of in the leading, in the forefront of this phenomenon, but it's all across the world. We see it, and in Japan, we see that 1/3 of Japanese adults under the age of 30 had never dated, and over 40% were virgins in the time of survey. Overall prediction. So I just men are not in. It's a whole phenomenon. I don't want to get into it. It's a whole phenomenon of especially men who are not interested in dating or sex. Predicted to be 75% of men in their 20s and 30s. So at some point, and many men are not interested in dating at all. And overall, prediction is that the proportion of singles in the world is expected to jump 20% by 2030. I can add one more statistic, maybe, that's really important to American population. So the Pew Research Institute, for example, predicts that a quarter of today's young people will never marry in their lifetime. They will never marry. Maybe they will go in and out in relationships, they will cohabit with some partners, but a quarter will never marry. And I'm not talking about the around 50% of divorces over a marriage lifetime. So if this is what's going on, if this is the reality, I want to share a question with you and ask you, can we change reality? It's an open question, and we will delve into it in a minute. The alternative, if we cannot change reality, maybe we should change how we feel about it. And and how singles feel about it. So I want this question to linger with us, and let's try to delve into these questions. So basically, when we try to decipher this phenomenon of singlehood, we tackle around eight main mechanisms that have changed the status of marriage around the world. I won't get so. In this session, I basically condensed a whole workshop around singles and single stigma and so on. And I also don't want to delve too much into the mechanisms, but I will just give you some examples of what's going on. So economics is maybe the most interesting phenomenon. No matter how we look at it, and no matter how what is the condition, the economic condition of a country, we see that all economic conditions lead to more singlehood. So I'll give you an example. In Sweden, we see a very generous welfare system. So the consequences of the welfare generous system is that people don't feel they need to marry with each other and don't feel they need to couple up in order to fund renting or buying an apartment, because the government supports so much the housing conditions that they choose to live independently. Fine. So what's going on in countries that are poor or even in poorer strata? So we see, for example, even in poorer countries like Spain, in Europe, like Spain and Italy, especially in recent years, that they suffered from a very serious crisis. We can think, okay, maybe they will marry at least to be to allow themselves to live in their own apartment with someone else. So marriage will serve them well in this in finding housing for themselves and their partner, right? To fund one apartment is much easier than in two than in one, right? But no, in these countries, and even in poorer strata in the US, for example, or in Japan, we basically see that instead of marrying up and finding their own apartment, they are basement dwellers, and they stay with their parents because they cannot afford themselves to live in their own apartment. They want to spend more on leisure activities and so on, so they stay with their parents. The third condition is people that do have money. They are not in a very generous welfare states, but they do have money and they can afford themselves. For example, in rich countries like Germany, England, or in upper strata in the US, there again, we see a phenomenon that instead of marrying up because they can afford themselves to live out or to buy an apartment for themselves and their partner, instead they buy their privacy. So in a sense, privacy became a good in and of itself that people prefer, and kind of, in a way, pay for it. So they buy their own apartments, they live in for themselves, and they say, if I rich enough or I have enough money, I would just spend it on living on my own instead of coupling up. So it's really interesting phenomenon. So in all economic conditions, we see that people choose time and again to stay single. And we also see mechanisms of risk aversion in an age of divorce. So many divorces. So the children of parents don't want to repeat their parents' mistakes, so they stay single. Of course, our mindset is more consumer-oriented, capitalist-oriented, and we think, what do we prefer? Our privacy, our freedom, our own space, or do we want to couple up? And this mindset leads many to choose singlehood. Of course, secularism, religiosity, the decline of religiosity, taking many people away of marriage and coupling up and couplehood. And even in, for example, Mexico, in Catholic, very Catholic countries, because marriage is kind of a one-time decision, maybe choose not to tie the knot because they want to stay with their options open. So again, in all kind of circumstances, we see people choosing more singlehood. And we see singles in popular culture and in series like Seinfeld and Girls and Sex and the City and so on. And what's interesting is once cable TV get into countries, developing countries like India or Brazil and so on, we see people in these spaces, in this region, we see an increase in people in singlehood in these regions. And of course, women independence, women feel they don't need to define themselves with marriage. They don't identify themselves as family oriented. They invest more in their careers, more in their education, and so on. So of course, it contributes to singlehood, urbanization. People cannot afford themselves to live in the city, in big families, and cities are more oriented towards singles. So in terms of leisure activities and in general social activities, cities are more oriented toward singlehood and singleness. And immigration, so we have different types of immigration. For example, from the Philippines, more women immigrate to other countries. It's a huge phenomenon. And in other countries like China, people from China immigrate to other countries because they want to work in construction. The result of these trends is that women from the Philippines don't have potential partners from their origins, so they find it more difficult to find partners, and the same vice versa from in countries like in immigrants originated from China, for example. So the sum of it was a very short introduction, but to sum it up, I'll just add this one. Maybe I'll just say, this is a graph I made. Just see here, this is the median age at marriage, and see how it increases recently in the US. This is the median age in the US. So in around the 50s, people, the median age was 21, 22, and today it's around 29, 30 years old. And we see an increase in parallel to the information age. and technologies. I won't get into it, but much of the information, the internet, computers, and so on, makes our society more networked and less nuclear. So instead of being in a family and living in a family, people find themselves more comfortable to live on as a node on a social network. And they find themselves more comfortable to live in an environment of many singles, many friends, that they have weak ties and strong ties with them, instead of tuning inwards into their family. Just think of this very common event that you live in Manhattan, for example, and then you get married and you find yourself forced into living in a suburb in New Jersey or the Queens or whatever, to afford yourself a big apartment, a nice apartment with your partner and kids. So this phenomenon basically means that you tune inwards into your nuclear family and kind of cut ties. And we see in research that, and in my research as well, that single people are friendlier, have more friends, and their social satisfaction is higher than married people. So in this sense, we see a huge difference between married people and single people, and this is another indicator contributing to this phenomenon. So once again, can we change reality? Maybe we do, but the sum of all the mechanisms at play kind of hints us that we cannot change reality. At least it doesn't seem it will be so easy to do, even if we want it. And I'm not sure we want to change reality. We want to fight against others' will. But in any case, I think it leaves us with the question: how can we feel about it, and what can we do to feel better about this situation? And this leads me to the next part of our discussion, to talk about single stigma and social pressure. And basically, if we want people to feel better in the situation we are in, we need to think about social pressure and stigma, and how the single person, even if they want to stay single, how do they feel about staying single? It's very important. And what do we think about single people around us? So in one study, we see that singles are heavily stigmatized. Despite comprising the majority of the population in many Western countries, very similar to the condition of women. Women are also half of the population, around half of the population, and still are stigmatized and discriminated against. Exactly the same, or very similar to this phenomenon, we see that our perceptions of other single person, and maybe our perception of ourselves, and it doesn't matter gay, lesbians, or any sexual orientation. If we are singles or other singles, our perception, most of us hold negative perception of single people. And in one study, for example, they asked college students to describe in a text, a very simple text, what do they think about married people and what do they think about single people in terms of their characteristics and in general impression on these two populations. And we see a distinct impression. On married people, people say that they are mature, they are probably happy, content with their situation, they are loving, caring, honest, social, and so on. And when they ask about single people, they basically saw the researchers saw that single people described by being immature, insecure, self-centered, sad, lonely, and so on. So this is quite striking, and really we need to think about, especially in before Valentine's Day. You know, I just read today a tweet on Twitter that someone complained that that her boss asked around who is single in her job, and basically he wanted volunteers to work on Valentine's Day. So you wanted to know who is single that can work extra hours on Valentine's Day, which for me it's kind of striking. Just think about other populations. If it's racial population, ethnic population, sexual orientation population, and so on. If the boss asks around what is their tendency and so on, because he or she wants to do whatever on whatever day or occasion. And we tackle it quite often. Bosses ask around, for example, I saw it, I heard it in my interviews. Someone told me about a boss asking around, I need someone to work on vacations, to work extra hours, or to have this and that assignment. And because you are a single person, probably you have more time. So please take it on yourself. It only makes sense because you don't have a life. So this is the underlying message usually. So basically we see a very concerning stigma. Singles are defined by what they are not married, and what they lack, a nuclear family usually. And therefore singleness is seen as a deviation from the norm. And therefore we use the term singleism to describe this phenomenon. So on that note, I want to stop a little bit and make just an open conversation. So first we will be divided into pairs. And what I ask you is very simple. First, maybe you don't know each other, so it's a great opportunity to say hi and introduce you to each other, introduce yourself to each other. And next, in a few minutes, because really we are in a rush here, ask each other the following questions. What do you think about married people? What is your perception of married people? If you are married, if you are not married, whatever. What is your perception of yourself, of others? What is your perception of single people? And I want to push it a bit further. And please ask yourself, what do you think about single people in older ages? So a single person, if you are single, other people you know, single in their 40s, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Really, and be honest. It's not about, it's not examination, and you don't need to share it in this forum. You will just talk about it in pairs. But really be honest and vent out some of your perceptions of single people. And yeah, let's do it, Mia.
All right, so as we are getting this started, just again, as a reminder, please turn your cameras on. You'll have about between 7 to 8 minutes to discuss, and we hope to see you soon, and you might even get to be in a room with our featured speaker. So we'll again, you'll automatically go in, and we'll see you shortly.
Maybe someone want to share. Even we should divide it up back to the full screen to see everyone. Someone wants to share an experience, perception, something that they are familiar with in terms of single people. Miriam, you choose.
Sure, I see, right, so I see Brian, so we'll let Brian start. So for everyone, if you want, just you can use the raise your hand feature, or as Brian did, he literally raised his hand, it's fine, or use the chat and use the chat feature. But all right, Brian, I'm gonna ask you to unmute, and yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm very old school, as you know. One of the things that we talked about in our chat room was, you know, again, the whole idea of urban life for single people, both single people, and how much time and the opportunities we had to interact with other single people. This last year has seen so many changes, and certainly lessened the availability of those opportunities. And I just don't know how many of them are going to be permanent, how many of them are temporary. And I was curious what you thought about that, and how it may have changed single life for urban dwellers.
That's a very interesting question. So my suggestion, Miriam, that I will run through very quickly for 1 minute. The rest of the presentation, it's a whole workshop, apparently. And then we will open the ground for Q&A, and I will just discuss everything freely. Yeah, that's fine?
Sure.
Perfect. So I will get back to your question, Brian. Thank you. So we don't have time to get into it. And it's really important to understand the many forms of discrimination, of social exclusion conditions that singles experience. And I brought you many types. One finding for my data shows that unmarried people experience discrimination 50% more than unmarried people. Discrimination, of course, is more with increases with age and sexual orientation and so on. We see singleism in the workplace. We see singleism in regulation and legislation. We see singleism against cohabiting singles. We know of several cases that people got fired because they are not part of the norm, of the convention, and so on. I really run through it. One interesting finding is that people prefer not to rent apartments to two friends or single people. They prefer to rent apartment to cohabiting couples and then to married couples, because they kind of will keep their apartment, better than others. This is one another form of discrimination, and actually the Atlantic published an article claiming that single people suffer from around 1,000 laws that discriminated them in this way or another. It's pretty much a big deal. And the result, so I'm moving quickly here, but the result, and we see it all over, the result is that single people that suffer from discrimination show the same symptoms as any other population. They suffer from mental illness, reduced self-esteem, and I'm sure you know people around you or yourself that because of their singlehood or because of they don't find a partner and don't adhere to the norm, to the social norm on time, they show lower self-esteem, even depression, feeling isolation, especially, Brian, of course, during COVID-19. And I will talk about it a little bit more. And of course, it affects self-identity to be more negative. And we won't get to it. I wish we had more time. But in my book, I found several strategies, and I will end with this slide, several strategies. I wish I could have given you some examples, but several strategies that happy singles use to fight singleism and to feel better about themselves, or to make others around them who are single to feel better. This includes awareness to singleism and their condition, acceptance, self-acceptance, positive perception of what is singleness and what are the opportunities in being single, and even actively defy social pressure and social exclusion, and finally empowerment. Even if it's participating in workshop, taking a class, going to therapy or consulting and so on, it's extremely important to feel empowered about your current condition, whatever. And we know from it's a fact that many people, actually most of us at some point will be single. So we need whatever, if it's before marriage, after marriage, and so on, we need to develop these toolkits. We need to educate children, students, future generation. We need to educate ourselves, our friends, our relatives, and we need to be much more aware than we are today about the condition of singles, the opportunities in being single, and in general about the age of singlehood. So I have many things to tell you, and I'm sorry I don't have the time. But yeah, thank you very much, and let's open the discussion, whatever time we have left with.
Yes, we have a few minutes. So again, if anyone has questions or wants to share something from their discussion, if you can use the chat feature and type it in, or use the raise your hand feature, and we'll be happy to call on you and again get to as many as possible. Again, thank you for a very, very interesting presentation. We might have to do a part 2 on this. So if we have any, hold on one second. I see Miles. Okay.
Yes, my question really is, I challenge the thesis that being single is some sort of negative condition. We can make the same thesis for people who are cohabitating, who are quite unhappy. And it's really a matter of following the principles that you laid out, which starts with self-worth. And when you have your own self-worth and you socialize with other humans who also have self-worth, then you all elevate. And it doesn't matter that you are living alone or living with someone else at that moment, although it's of course more convenient, but there are other things that come with being coupled.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. And I'm not talking about the reality itself. The reality is quite diverse, and you are totally right. And I will even say that we find that many married people feel lonelier than single people, because in their marriage, they feel lonely, while single people network with others and live with each other and volunteer. And in my research, I see that singles volunteer more than married people. They take care of their parents more than married people. So it's really a question of how you see it. And I didn't get into that question, but we also, and it's very important to distinguish between two populations. One is singles by heart, and the other is singles by circumstances. And not everyone are single because they didn't want to be single. Many people, we see that they are single. It's kind of a nature, a second nature, and we actually currently under investigation to identify those people that are actually singles by heart. So they want to be single. It's good for them to be single, and they achieve a lot in being single. And yeah, it's really important. And I will add one more thing. We also need on this separation between the population now. And people came to me after several of my lectures, and tell me, I'm a married person, but really I'm a closeted single by heart person, and within my marriage, I feel that I kind of need my singleness, and I long to be on my own, and I've kind of forced into marriage, but I'm closeted single. So it's really interesting. Yeah.
Elise, did you had a question? All right, here we go. One sec. There you go.
What I'm finding is that the society as a whole is very couple oriented. Not necessarily married, but if you're not with somebody, you have to be with somebody. And that, I think, is a stigma that has to be overcome. A lot of the perception is what is wrong with you if you're not with somebody. But for me, as a single woman, my answer, my response is there's no inventory at my age, and there is none. So it is what it is, and you just make a life for yourself, and you look for people in the same situation. And then you end up with an economic situation where you're not in parity economically, so that limits what activities you can participate in. But if you want to order dinner, it's dinner for two. If you want to go on a cruise, it's for double occupancies, and you get stigmatized and charged if you're not as a couple. So.
Exactly. I totally agree. And maybe, Miriam, I don't mind, but do you want to take one more question, or maybe I will say something about COVID-19?
I think if you can say about COVID-19, and then we also got the request if you can share the last slide again as you wrap up. I think that would be great.
Oh, the research toolbox.
I think
Yeah,
that
this one, that one.
it was just, I think, the last slide that you had shared before we stopped.
Let's see. This is the last slide, but I guess you meant this one, right?
I think that's what they had requested. Yes.
Yeah. So it's really just a title, 5 titles, and we have so much to talk about it. But I would just say something about COVID-19, just to wrap up. I think COVID-19, it's very unfortunate situation to many people, married people and unmarried people alike. But I just discussed it with a reporter last week. It's also a question that many single people need to ask themselves. In this situation, it's a very unique situation. COVID-19 is a very unique situation because you are not forced and you are not expected to date, to meet other people, to participate in events, to meet new people, to meet potential partners. It's kind of all the race slows down, and it's a good question that many people should ask themselves, how do I feel about it? Does it provide an opportunity to just feel great about being on my own and to concentrate on activities that I like, or maybe I'm missing something. I'm missing an opportunity to meet a potential partner, and all answers are great and legit, of course, but it's great experience and experiment to identify yourself as single by heart or single by circumstances. And many people discover themselves now as singles by heart because they feel, wait, I feel great on my own without the pressure, without the exclusion, without the expectations, without discrimination, without everything. I hang out with friends on Zoom, with neighbors, if I can or are allowed to, and I feel great about it. So it's really an interesting question. It's really an interesting time, of course, besides the unfortunate and very sad situation and context we are in. I'm zooming in this sense. That's all. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure for me.
Thank you. Thank you again very much for a really interesting presentation. And again, we might have to do a part 2 later this year, hopefully, when we can say we're in a more post pandemic world. So thank you for that. Thank you everyone for joining us. I posted links for upcoming events for Olive, for our next Torch Talks on March 15th, as well as other upcoming events on AFHU's website. Again, if you'd like to learn how to get more involved, please email alumni@afhu.org. Thank you everyone for joining. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and we hope to see you all in person very soon as we can. Thank you very